Right, there we go. We're live. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the IsoEngine Livestream. So, as you guys know, last time we were working on let's have a look, the prefab mode state, getting that to work, which we did. We also started implementing a highlighting box, which isn't working. I'll just show you the code for that quickly. So this is what we were working on last time. I need to revisit this at some point. I think I'll do it later off camera, but I started work on that. The issue that we're having basically is I can't get the maths to quite work properly, but that's just like a minor issue. Most of the code is there, most of it works. I just need to get the adjustments right for the position of each of these variables, which is something fairly trivial. I'll do that off camera, so you've seen me struggle with it enough already. Just note that it will be in there and it will be slightly off. What I'm going to do today is just working on hooking up the rest of the controls, and then if I get that done, I will start work on the dynamic container for storing prefabs, basically. In a way, all that really is just saving and loading to a file. But I need to come up with the way that that file is read, basically. I did some work on this previously at uni, where kind of basically used lines in a file to define different parameters, which I might do again. I just need to kind of revisit that and refresh my knowledge on it basically today, so we'll try and get through that as fast as we can. So let's start with what we know about the prefab system itself. So if I bring up the Jira board again, actually, this has some useful stuff in it. And if the prefab stuff is prepared for the UI, this should have a list of... No, it doesn't, okay. Yeah, list of stuff that needed doing. I don't know if it's on here either. We have saving and loading. We have the toggle between editor states, which we've done. We need to put it in a saving, a loading mode, a placement. We need a placement key. Trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. I might do it simply based on other stuff that we've done before. So left click would be placement, right click would be saving. I just need to kind of work out how that all plays out really, and if that's suitable, or if I need to have two separate states that you kind of toggle between. I think that to me makes a bit more sense from the user side, so it's less confusing. There's also this toggle that I wanted to implement where you can ignore air blocks when placing stuff. So let's say you wanted to place a house, you would capture the whole thing, and that would be saved with air, so it'd like save the whole volume basically. And when placing that, obviously you don't want air to be kind of included in the placement, so you don't want blocks around it to be deleted necessarily. You might do, which is why I want to include it as an option. So air ignoring is something that I need to add in. It's just a simple toggle. And what else? Oh, and also prop and voxel culling. So what I mean by that is when saving prefabs, I want to give the person the option of saving just voxels, saving just prefabs, or saving both. Same for loading them in as well, because you might have this really cool castle that you've built. You might want to save it with the hill, just in case you want to use the hill, but you might actually decide when placing it you don't want the hill in there, so you turn that off. I mean, that example doesn't quite make sense because it would be made out of, all of it would be made out of voxels in theory, but you get the idea. So you might have like a cool prefab setup that you want to place in, or a cool voxel setup that is part of something else, you know. So those are some toggles that I want in there. So let's go into our code for that. So it would be an editor camera. Let's have a look. So we've got these toggles. We also need to make these U properties as well at some point so they're accessible by blueprints. But based on what I've just discussed, basically we want bool. We say we want bool saving. So this will be equal to false. So you'll be loading stuff in initially. We want bool air cult and bool. Actually, this will be an int. Prop voxel, or rather voxel prop. Voxel prop culling mode. There we go. Set that to 0. I might actually set this to true initially. Error is not something that we want to really pay attention to. It will of course be saved into the file, we won't be able to disable that, so it'll have to be saved in no matter what, just because of the way the structure of the files will work. Unless I guess I use something like -1 as an indicator that nothing's there, I suppose. Actually, that'll be first true. Right. So now I've got those variables, we need to go through the process of setting them up. Toggle saving prefabs. Toggle air culling. And toggle prefab mode. And in fact, I will call this prefab. Wait, not that one. Prefab mode. Okay, so that makes sense. So now we just need to fill these in. These are relatively simple processes because we've done similar stuff before. It's literally as simple as doing this. And then we'll do the same for airco. So this is the same as other bits of code that I have that do similar things, so I'll just find something like that. Basically just this, but a different variable. Let's put that in. copy that in. There we go, simple process. Bear with me 1 second, what I'm going to do is just quickly change the stream title. I've noticed it's an old one. There we go, just updated the title of the stream to IsoEngine Editor Prefab Implementation, so that it's actually relevant to what we're doing, rather than just me basically not being ill, which is what it has been for the last however many streams. So we've basically implemented all the toggles for these here in code. So now what we need to do is hook these up to the actual controls themselves. So we'll go to where we have all of our control input definitions here. So all we're doing again is just kind of binding an IE pressed action to the input system. So when a button is pressed, call this function. It's basically identical to this, but obviously we need to set up the various names that we're going to have. Toggle air culling, toggle prefab mode, and toggle saving prefabs. So I'll just move that onto the top so it makes more sense, and then we will copy these across to here. So with that hooked up in code, we now need to set it up in the editor, set up the input states. So this is the fun where we get to add some additional keys to this gigantic list. These will probably need to be rewritten at some point, because basically Josh will be, when he's doing the UI work, he'll be looking over the input mappings and kind of set them up in a way that makes more sense. Just need to make sure that my names actually match up, so I'll start with toggle prefab mode. I want to have a look at the key that I've used for what's something else I've used? Prop mode, I think, was the thing. It wasn't. Surface placement mode, overlap mode. Could reuse the key bindings for that, but for now I will give them their own unique keys, so I don't have to do any additional programming just yet. Let's see. What haven't I used? I think I've used pretty much all of the bottom row. Maybe I haven't. I think B and C are still available. What I need ideally is like a map that I can use to have a look at quickly and see which ones are used. So C, V, R, and I think Z and X are used. Pretty much all of the bottom row. And for some reason, oh, K and L are for saving and loading. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Z and X are used. So I guess I use J, H and G. So yeah, it's going to get quite messy, but use G for now. we can always update this later. I just basically need it to work for now. So that's implemented. Let's add in an additional one. Let's add 2 while we're at it, and we can come back to it. Toggle air culling. Map that to H. And then the last one is toggle saving prefabs. Now there's no way of me knowing that this works for now without doing additional work first, so I'm just going to work off of the assumption that it does, because I've done this so many times that it should work, basically. There's no reason why it shouldn't. So yeah, I'm going to leave those as is. Let's think. Is there anything else I need to do? Don't think so. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to say that this part of the setup is complete. I will save this and compile it just to make sure there's no errors, but I will then move across the Jira task for that. So we're a bit behind schedule on this. It was supposed to be done on Friday, but that's because I got sidetracked with something else. I think that's one of my main issues, and that's something that I'm going to be working on moving forward, is... Wait one sec. What I just got sidetracked with, I was just seeing if, because obviously you can do plus equals, so I'm seeing if this is kind of a thing. Not equals is obviously the wrong thing, because this is just comparing the two, saying that they're not equal to one another and then pushing out a result. But what I actually want equals, well, I guess that's what I've already done. I'll do it like that. I guess it's not exactly rocket science. But yeah, sorry, what I was saying before is I have a this is a good example actually. I quite easily get sidetracked by stuff. Just part of who I am. So I'm going to try moving forward to stay more focused on the tasks that I'm working on and not get distracted by stuff like what I just did. And what that means is every day I'm now having a meeting with Matthews in the morning. That basically sets my agenda for the day, basically gives me kind of some motivation to work on a specific task. And then on top of that, also going to kind of just try and really hone in on the tasks that I've already set rather than add additional features in. If I think they're necessary, I'll add them to the backlog. I'll work on them later. If they're essential, then obviously I'll work on them, but until then it doesn't matter. So let's just fill in the Jira now that I've done that task. Done that. Build. Was that on editor controls? I think it was. Yeah, I just need to update the other one as well that I just did. I'll move that to the top so it's easier to find. And there's no child thing, so that's great. So I can close that off. So now I need to choose another task to work on. So that will be... Well, I'll be working on this simultaneously as well as... Is it on here? Adjustable storage. So I'll start working on this, and then I think naturally I'll end up adding in voxel and prop culling anyway, because that'll kind of be an easy thing. It'll be like a, you know, don't spawn this in if this toggle is true. It's as simple as that. So I'll work on those side by side, I think. So what I'm going to do is grab some existing code that I have. So I need to look to the file code that I've got already just as a kind of basis to work on this. It won't be the final implementation because obviously I will need to save and load multiple prefabs, so that'll be something that is worked on a bit more in the future, but for now I will keep it simple. So it's in each of the respective classes. I think the easiest one to follow will probably be props, because it doesn't have extra voxel code in it. So if I can find, here we go, save prop state. So I'll be using save and load prop state as kind of a basis for what I'm working on at the moment. So I'll just copy this quick. Obviously I'll change everything, but just so I can work on it in here. So let's set it up. We'll go to the header file again. Oh, we also need saving and loading capture keys as well, I forgot about that. I will add this in very quick, it won't take me long. Say prefab, void, load prefab. Okay. So let's just create the links for these quickly. Let me just dump what I've got on the clipboard somewhere quickly. There we go. And while I'm at it, I'll do the same for this as well. There we go. So I've got the clipboard free. Let's just copy this as a basis to work with. Just want to have the load prefab. Actually, say prefab first. Not that it really matters. And then obviously the counterpart is load prefab. There we go. Just set up the input mappings again quickly. Again, so we were using GHJ. I don't believe P and O are being used. Guess P for prefab makes sense. So I think I'll use O for saving, P for loading, so I'll just add 2 in. again, these will all be cleaned up, so you don't have to worry about these being a mess. These key bindings are a mess. We just need to finalize all of the inputs basically before we're going to come up with a control scheme, and then I will refine that down. So one thing I'll do is probably have shared keys, or rather certain keys will be used more than once depending on what mode you're in. So you might use the saving and loading key, for example, for both loading a new scene and loading in a prefab, depending on whether or not you're in voxel mode or not, and that kind of thing. So that's just an example. We might not actually do that, but just to give you an idea. Or like overlap mode in props might share a key with something in prefab mode, basically. And then all in all, that should condense down the list of keys that we actually are mapped across. Hopefully things will make a bit more sense. Like the toggles might just have, like the toggles themselves might share like some generic toggle keys from U to E or something. So then you know where they always are no matter what mode you're in, and it's just the order in which they show in the UI. So save prefab, said we were going to use O, and then load prefab, we will use P. So that's all good. Oh, I did not mean to open Discord. I do that all the time actually. Need to stop. Put that down. Okay, here we go. So we'll call this the prefab save file. This is a bit different than what we've done previously. What we're doing is we're saving a volume. So it will be something along the lines of for I equals 0 to the dimensions of the current brush. And then obviously we'll do X and Y in a second, and then it will be saving from both the prop and voxel code. So let's think about how best to go about this. I will just first of all copy in, I'll move this out quickly, duplicate this, set these to Y's obviously, these to Z's. Then we need what's essentially cursor position, kind of, where it's ticking through. So and then we'll do the math based on that. Same for the others, of course. So it'll be some variation of these, obviously. Sorry, not those, X. Y and Z. And I'm not sure if it will be in quite the right place just yet, because, like I say, the maths that we were working on before didn't quite work. But I will assume that we can just minus half of the well, we'll start with the cursor location, so it's so if it shows up on the code complete. So basically what we're doing here is, I mean, this is the theory anyway, whether or not it works I don't know, but we're taking the current cursor location, so the place in place in 3D voxel space that I'm looking at, we're adding the X value, so where we need to tick, how much we need to tick through, and then we're also taking the brush diameter as well. At the start of this, I want to save the brush diameter X, Y and Z so I know how to read the file format. So I think basically we just do this for each of the things. So first of all, we're just saving these variables. Oh, thanks for the follow, man. Means a lot. But yeah, we're just saving those variables there at the top, so we know how to read the file, which basically will tell the loading code how to interpret the data that we've put in it, like how many rows, how many columns, and so on. My only issue now is I'm not sure if I do this again, not sure if it'll truncate the original data. I'll test that though, see how that works. Let me think. Let's just duplicate these across. Just to tie up these loose ends. So now we can start writing the rest of it basically. Oh, it shouldn't truncate actually, because the way we were doing this originally is doing this in a loop, so it restarts again and again, so I know that it works actually, just from it working in other places of the code. So how do I go about this? Well, first of all we need to locate both the voxel and the prop in any given position. To do that, let me think, we should trying to think of the best way to do it. And what I'll probably do is look at the existing code that I already have and work on it that way. I'll say we have an integer of current prop. And we have something called... Oh, here's a tricky part actually. There's multiple props that can be in multiple positions, so I'll have to have another for loop. Int I equals 0, length will be the amount of props in any given space. So find, I think it's props, props dot find props at position, find props in voxel location. Don't know why that didn't just do the thing. Can't remember what parameters this takes. However, this should take an X, a Y, and a Z. But in actual fact, it'll be current. And then I think this returns, is it a list it returns, or is it a vector? Not sure. Anyway, so we need the size. Vector of type int, so that's not the definition of vector. Have I got vector included here? Should do. Let me just check if I've used the vector elsewhere in the code. I always forget how to use these constructs. Oh, it's that way around, okay. Makes sense. We'll call that prop IDs. We'll do that. I quite like this song. Okay, add it to my like list. It's rare that I find a song on this free songs list I actually like. So one thing I now want to do is save the amount of props that we have so that the system knows how many to read through. So we're just going to do that basically. We'll inline it since it's only one amount. And then call it we'll just use the prop IDs dot size. There we go. So we've saved it. Now we need to run through however many times and actually save the prop data. So we're actually just duplicating this, like it is literally just this code, with the exception being that we're opening a file. Okay. And also we're accessing, I believe it's in props.prop data. So there's that level of abstraction there because we're accessing it from a different class. So I think that kind of makes sense. I think that should be fine. So let me just run it through in my head, ignoring the fact that we don't know if this code actually works yet, whether or not it returns the correct position. Have a look at code. So just getting the prop IDs, that's where they are in the list. We're getting them from a specific location. If there aren't any there, obviously 0. If we find a list of them, it could be however many exist in that place. I don't think on how many it can be. So we're saving that to the file, so we know how many times to iterate through, and we're saving each piece, about each prop in that list. It won't be this though, it'll be, good job I did check it, so wouldn't have spotted this otherwise. We want to save prop IDs and then I in there instead. There we go. So we're actually checking, we're actually saving the ID based on where what we've gotten from the prop IDs list. That's fine. So now we've done that, we need to do the same for voxels. So with voxels, there's obviously only one voxel per space, and there's always going to be one, even if that voxel is just air. So what I'm going to do is basically the same process, but I'm going to steal from the voxel code. Let's find where we've got it. It could be anywhere in here. Look, did I just see it? There we go. We'll copy this. Yep, we want it in here. So we're not looping through a position this time. We're already at the position that we want to be in. Well, this adds a kind of banner in the works. I guess we can make it public. Why not? It's supposed to be an internal thing, but unless we did gets, but I don't need to, so honestly, just be a waste of time. I know this is bad practice, you know, sue me. So we need to go into here, make it public. To be fair, out of all of these, it's probably the one thing that makes sense to have public. I could make gets, but it just reduces the efficiency of the code, and to be honest, that's all I care about. Just hope it doesn't break everything else by doing that. I just hope I don't have any definitions that this relies upon. Oh, that it's reliant on it. I don't think so. Okay, great, that should be fine. Right, let's go back to here. You gonna work now? Cool, that's working. So we're just saving whatever's in there, which is fine. I honestly think that's everything. The only code really that will change eventually is how it is that I open these files. So the body of the function will kind of remain the same. We're saving in a particular format, we're reading in a particular format, saving to a text file, nothing's unique about that. The only thing that will change is the location of the files and how many there are. So we'll use a function to probably search a specific location in our game data. You find a specific file based on what you've selected in the editor. So the editor will kind of preload a preview of all of the prefabs that you have potentially, and then you'll be able to select a file based on what it is you can see, and then we'll read from that accordingly. So this is the only bit of code that will really change, this open line. There'll be a lot more code in here. If I say a lot, it'll probably be like for loop and a find function. Will be it. Maybe some stuff to do with how we're saving, stuff like that. But yeah. There'll be some extra code there. None of this will have to change, I don't think. Unless what I could do, there's a slightly easier way of doing it, but it would bloat the code quite a lot, where I save every prefab to a single file, but then it would mean searching through every single line to find what prefab you're after, which, you know, after say saving 100 prefabs would take forever, so don't want to do that. I want to do it in files instead, splitting them up into, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get rid of this, we don't need it anymore, and this is just prefab save file.close. So now we are doing the same, but in reverse. This is where it gets a bit messy because we have to do some extra stuff, we have to do some assignments. Plenty of getter lines. Don't need this. Oh, actually no we do. Ignore me. We're essentially copying the structure of this, but like I say, doing, rather than the saving, we're doing the loading. So I will copy this entire thing. Dump it at the top here. I'll obviously comment Well, I'll change stuff as I goes. One thing I've just realised would be an additional toggle as well is Prefab Overwriting. So if there is a prefab existing in the space that you're loading to, do you want to erase them? With voxels it's like not really an option because there's only one voxel in space, so you have to overwrite it, but in this case we don't actually have to. So we've done that. We also get temp variables to safety, so we can spawn in new things, but we don't need them until we're inside of the bodies. This function. Instead we need to replace it with an int called prop amount. Prop amount in given space, we'll make that equal to we'll just say it's a thing for now, and I'll assign them in a second. We basically want these. Don't need to read that anymore, we just need to do a get line for it and then pass it into here. But we need temp variables for, I think we do actually need these exact ones. So variables for all of those. This is the one thing we actually can assign now, so I'll just work out how to do that quickly. Instead of doing this, we're getting these variables. So we need to save these as well. So we're just getting the for loop sizes, so how big is the prefab that we're trying to load? We can get that. So it's just the inverse of what we were doing here, where we're saving them, instead we're loading them in, so we can use them in our for loop body. Won't assign them just yet because I'm going to convert them from string to int first. So I just need to do this code. Is get line not recognized. Probably because I've given it the wrong file. There we go. Don't know why that just did that. We're just extracting out the X, Y, and Z. Okay, and then we're replacing, we obviously don't need those anymore, replacing these with this, so we don't actually want to just do it to the size of the thing that we basically want it to loop through however many times for the size of the object that you're doing, rather than the brush size, so that doesn't make any sense. We're loading an object, not loading based on world space. So these can stay the same, that's fine. So we're loading in the prop amount. We need to get the temp X, Y, and Z, temp rotation, temp prop model ID, and temp physics enabled. So this bit of code here is for this for loop. We're actually pretty much just copying this code down here. and then we're just spawning these in. So first of all, we want smoothing mode turned off no matter what. So I'll just have a temp So we want to turn this off. We do want to save the previous state though. Let's think. We also want we want to do all of that, and then we want to turn it back on, or rather reset it to its previous state. So I'm going to grab the terrain code. So that I'm not redeclaring these a free loop, I'm going to put them up here. I'm going to call them voxel. There we go. So I think that's everything. A lot to take in, that's for sure. One thing I need to just update is where this is going. Let me think. Oh, there is a slight complication actually, because of the way right, yeah, so this actually isn't this variable that needs to be saved. It needs to be the increment, basically. So this just needs to be X, Y, and Z. So where it is that it's being saved to. Oh, we don't even need to save the X, Y, and Z at all. Just by its very nature, we have it saved already. So let's take out any reference to X, Y, and Z. Because we're literally just doing current location, basically, where we are currently. It's just overcomplicating it. We don't need any of that stuff. There we go. Also, this is not prefab size X, Y, and Z. This is current X in the wrong variables in there. Right, glad I've got that sorted. Prefab, okay, we've done all of that, we don't need it. Actually, I'll keep that for now. I'll explain why in a second. Do we close out the file? Prefab file save close, yep we did, so that's all good. So the reason I'm keeping this in is so I know whether or not I need to overwrite the props in that location. So we needed that extra toggle in there, didn't we? Void toggle prop overwrite. Okay, so this is the variable that allows us to control whether or not the prop in any given space will be overwritten. So I'm just going to go through all the usual processes of setting this up and binding it to a key. Okay, so it's that simple, and then let me just leave a to-do here quick, just so I don't lose where I am. There we go. Let's go back up to And then obviously we do that for the editor as well. Hopefully you can see like I'm doing this quite a lot. It's something that, you know, it's actually fairly simple once you get used to the process. It's just knowing what code to have initially and how to set it up. If you guys are implementing anything like this yourself, it's quite straightforward. It just takes a bit of getting your head around how the Unreal Engine deals with this kind of thing. We're using O and P already, but I'm thinking maybe shift it. So maybe put all of the prefab keys all in one place. No, there's not enough room. Let's assign it to U. Sorry, no, to I. Like you say, this list needs cleaning up massively. Don't assume that we won't. Okay, that's fine. Starting to get a bit fatigued of programming and talking at the same time, as you can probably tell. But I am nearly done with this, so what I'm going to do is get it kind of complete best I can. I will test it. No doubt there'll be some horrific crash and I'll never be able to fix it, but all being well, it'll work. But once I'm done with this, I think I'll call it a day. I'll also implement the toggles as well, actually. They're relatively simple, like the air overwriting toggle's really easy to do. Just reading whether or not the material's 0. And then deciding whether or not to do this line. That's all it is. Same for props, basically. If it's active, don't do it. So what I'm doing now is basically just getting... So if the prop overwrite mode is active, I'm getting all of the active props for each position as we increment through. And then basically deleting them. That's all I'm doing. Oh, that's not what I wanted. what's the code? Find props and voxel location. And then we're just using these. There we go. And then prop ID is .size. Or is it too few arguments? What have I done? What? Is that not how I wrote it before? I mean, I did it lowercase, but other than that, I don't know whether that would make any difference. Wrong scope, that's why. Wasn't anything to do with this variable, annoyingly. I don't know why the code highlight is like, I guess it's because, yeah, it's part of the arguments list. That makes sense. I think that's correct. So for the X, Y, and Z you're currently at, again, I've put the wrong bloody things in there. Just double check I actually use those variables. Yeah. Okay. So we're finding them at the current X, Y, Z. For each of them in the space, we're deleting them. Seems simple enough. For the culling modes, we need to read through the file anyway, so we need to leave this stuff in. This has to happen. The only thing that doesn't is if I'm going to assume that 0 is both, we want both. 1 would be we just want voxels. not equal to 1. Spawn it in. And then with this one, it's basically the same thing, but for mode 2. So if prefab mode not equal to 2, on temp, so what we're basically saying here is we're not culling out voxels. I don't know, let me just get it straight in my head. I need an expression that returns true if air culling mode is active, it's not equal to 0, but also if air culling mode is not true. Okay, let's see if this makes sense. So basically if voxels are not culled, we can spawn this one in. Also, if we're not in air culled, spawn that one in. or we're in air cold mode and it's not air. I think that makes sense. Right, so I've added a whole lot of code here. A lot of things could go wrong. Like, this is a lot to take in all at once. I'm just praying we don't get a crash. Knowing me, there'll be a crash, but let's just hope there isn't for now. Either way, I think no matter what the result is, I think I will leave it there because my mind is kind of fried trying to work through this. I'll probably come back to it later on in the day and fix it regardless, but yeah, let's just save this quickly. It'll probably take a long time because there's a lot to do here. At least I can do Jira for a bit, I guess, while we wait for that. Oh, it's compiled already, never mind. What have you found? Okay, I think I know what the one is. I believe that wherever I've used size, it needs to be a function call. Don't know why it doesn't just allow you to use it as a variable, but oh well. I believe it's only in those 3 places. Oh, I didn't remove this. There we go. Right, so this is where things get a bit confusing. I need to be in third mode. And it is the... Is it? See, this is the problem. I believe it's O and P. So O was for saving, I believe. P was for loading. That just caused a crash, whatever I did. I mean, I thought it might. See what the crash is. 151. Brief. Not sure if I need that. Maybe I do, who knows. This might take a while, since it's technically the first compile. I'm also going to assume that voxel prop culling is working, simply because all of the conditions for that are relatively simple, and I can always move it to the evaluation stage and test it properly anyway. It's the adjustable storage, which I'm not going to say is approved yet because I haven't got it working as a proof of concept. So we go into double check what mode we're in. So we want to capture using O and P. Still breaking. Okay. I will quickly try and work out if I can get a grasp on Y. Put that line back in. As long as they're written in the same order, they should be... yeah. See if the rest of the code runs without prefabs in it. At least I know this doesn't crash. I do want to see if voxels spawn in properly or not, basically. I'm also going to have a look at what the default states are for a lot of these variables, just make sure I'm happy with them. This we're not actually using currently. We'll keep it in nonetheless though. that might have had something to do with it. But not actually have anything to do with my code at all. Oh no, this is on a completely different line. Sure. Just a bit of clarity. Right, it's open on this screen. Let's compile that again. Let's change to mode we want. O-P. Okay, best thing to always do with these kinds of problems, come at it with a fresh set of eyes. So you guys have obviously seen me write this. You might have noticed a problem as I'm writing it. I'm going to assume it's something minor and that there's not something fundamentally wrong with my code, like a position thing or something. Yeah, I'm just going to do that thing where I test whether or not getting rid of that line actually does fix the issue before I go. Just so we can see if Fox will. Okay, so again, in the right mode, press O, press E. Get a different crash this time. .428. I presume it's to do with the amount of times it's reading the file, like it's not quite lining up with where it should be. Probably something to do with what variables I'm using for the for loop and what I'm accessing with them. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is come at this with a fresh set of eyes. I'll leave it there for now. I'd say I've made some good progress. If I do want to come back to this later, I might live stream it, might not. But we'll see. Depends on how up to it I am basically, because this kind of takes it out of me doing both programming and commentating at the same time. So I will take a break, and I will potentially see you guys later, but I will definitely see you guys tomorrow. So see you later, and thanks for watching.